home to Samsung Galaxy phones, world-class internet speed, and Gangnam Style. South Korea is now a symbol of modern innovation and economic success, but it wasn't always this way. Just half a century ago, South Korea was one of the poorest nations on Earth. After the Korean War ended in 1953, the country was devastated. Many buildings were ruined, life expectancy reduced to below 50 years, and at least 1 million civilians were killed. Yet, in just one generation, South Korea has moved from starvation to prosperity. The country's GDP per capita was $64 in 1955 and has grown over 400 times to $27,000 today. South Koreans who could barely afford one meal a day in the 1960s can now comfortably eat 3. But how did they achieve such an extraordinary turnaround? What was the secret behind South Korea's rapid economic rise? Let's find out. At the end of the Second World War in 1945, Koreans gained their independence, marking a turning point in the history of the country. It was a long-awaited moment of liberation, and hopes for a brighter future soared. Yet Korea's joy was short-lived. The peninsula soon faced 2 new and devastating challenges. The first blow was the division of Korea into 2 separate states, a communist north, backed by China and the Soviet Union, and a south aligned with the United States. This split not only tore apart families and communities, but also set the stage for a violent ideological clash. The second disaster was the Korean War, a brutal conflict between the 2 Koreas and their allies that erupted in 1950. Lasting 3 long years, the war claimed the lives of over 2 million Koreans, leaving both North and South devastated in ruins by the time the war ended in 1953. During this period, the average yearly income for a South Korean was only $82, less than half of an African country's average income of $179 at the time. The country's infrastructure had been decimated by the war. Half of its manufacturing capacity and over 3/4 of its railway network were in ruins. Primary schools struggled with overcrowding. South Korea's situation seemed bleak, yet this period of hardship would become the foundation for one of the most astonishing economic transformations in modern history. Countless wartime refugees fled to cities, creating an urban labor force for new factories. Land reform in the countryside meant that millions of Koreans now owned the land they farmed. These new landowners had the incentive and stability to be entrepreneurial. However, none of this was enough to jumpstart the South Korean economy, which was still stagnant in 1960, nor was the $6.6 billion provided by the US between 1946 and 1978 enough. The turning point for South Korea came in the 1960s. The leader behind this change was Park Chung-hee, who seized control in 1961 and went on to rule the country for the next 15 years. Park was a strong patriot who envisioned a South Korea free from foreign influence. He understood that true independence would only be possible if the nation became economically powerful and self-sufficient. He therefore geared the country towards rapid growth. Under his leadership, South Korea embarked upon several economic reforms. The first step Park took was export-led industrialization, as he believed that's the best path towards economic success, and he was right. Factories indeed brought in more revenue than agriculture. In the beginning, this meant assembling goods designed in Japan and establishing light industries such as wig making, textiles, garments, and footwear, and exporting them. These industries required minimal capital investment and leveraged the country's young, low-cost labor force. The results were impressive. By the mid-60s, Korea's economy was growing at an incredible 9% annually, and exports were expanding by 29% each year. By the 1970s, South Korea expanded into heavy and chemical industries such as steel, petrochemicals, cars, electronics, and shipbuilding. This shift was orchestrated through the government's heavy and chemical industrialization drive, which aimed to upgrade the industrial base and produce high-value exports. The country quickly became a manufacturing power in its own right, not just a place where the Japanese and others could manufacture their products. The result was huge profitability for South Korean companies and rising wealth levels across the country. The export-led model also allowed South Korea to earn foreign exchange, reduce its dependency on imports, and build robust trade relationships. These export earnings fueled further investments and development across the economy. In 1961, the country's total exports amounted to only $42 million. By 1977, this figure had grown to over $10 billion. By the 2000s, they were exporting advanced electronics like semiconductors, computers, and wireless telecommunication equipment. By 2015, South Korea, with less than 1% of the global population, became the fifth largest exporter in the world, contributing an impressive 3% to the world's total exports. The South Koreans were able to achieve this economic miracle as a result of aggressive industrial policy. The industrial policy implemented by South Korea in the 60s and 70s radically and drastically changed the South Korean economy from an agrarian one to one centered on export-orientated industries. Beginning in the early 1960s, South Korea launched a series of 5-year economic plans to target specific industries, guide investments, and ensure consistent growth. By directing public funds and encouraging private investment, South Korea channeled resources into manufacturing, elevating its economy from poverty to rapid growth. This industrial policy not only allowed the nation to increase its long-term economic performance, helping it avoid the middle income trap, but also fostered innovation and job creation. Many of today's industrialized nations, which experienced their industrial revolutions after the British, have all employed industrial policies at different times in their development cycles. Countries like France, the USA, Japan, Germany, and Russia implemented industrial policies at key points in their development, pushed for by dominant leaders who prioritized economic and social reform and industrialization. With this high focus on industrialization, there's a need for a skilled workforce. This led to the South Korean government heavily investing in education to build a skilled workforce. They made an extraordinary effort to rebuild its education system, creating universal access to primary and secondary education. This created a solid foundation for literacy and knowledge around the population. Over the years, South Korea has experienced a remarkably high rate of return on its investment in education, averaging around 10%. Also, a significant wage premium is linked to higher education. In 2007, college graduates in South Korea earned up to 2.5 times more than those with only a junior high school education. The country's rapid industrialization has led to a labor market highly segmented by educational background, making higher education essential for entering the primary labor market. This link between education and economic opportunity is further strengthened by Korea's Confucian heritage, where education is deeply valued and associated with positions of influence. Reflecting the national emphasis on education, the government has consistently increased its commitment to funding this sector. The Ministry of Education operates on an annual budget of around $29 billion, accounting for around 20% of central government expenditure. Beyond government funding, Korean families also prioritize education, leading to high private spending. The government allocates 3.4% of GDP to formal schooling, but when private and informal education is included, this figure approaches 10%. But the government not only invests in education, they also give room to the development and expansion of the large family-owned conglomerates known as chaebols. These conglomerates like Samsung, Hyundai, and LG received government support in the form of low-interest loans, subsidies, and tax breaks. In exchange, these chaebols were tasked with spearheading industrial growths. They were encouraged to enter multiple industries, thus creating diversified portfolios and contributing massively to South Korea GDP. For example, Samsung had an inauspicious beginning as an exporter of fish, vegetables, and fruit in 1938. Today, Samsung is led by the second and third generations of the Lee family, one of Asia's wealthiest families, according to Forbes. Over the last 80 years, the conglomerate has expanded significantly with interests in a wide array of sectors, including electronics, insurance, shipbuilding, luxury hotels, healthcare, an amusement park, and even a university. However, its most prominent and influential subsidiary is Samsung Electronics, global leader in technology. For the past decade, Samsung Electronics alone has contributed over 14% to South Korea's GDP. With government backing, chaebols were encouraged to expand globally. This fostered competition, innovation, and efficiency, as chaebols invested in research and development and achieved technological self-sufficiency. To support its industrial goals, Korea invested in major infrastructure projects such as transportation and energy. In the 1960s, infrastructures to support the light industries and export were created. These included the construction of railways and several small highway projects at first. In the late 1960s, the exports grew by nearly 50% per year, and as a result, the first major highway project, which was to connect the country's largest cities, Seoul in the northwest and Busan in the southeast, was constructed. This project was momentous because not only did it establish a vital industry corridor in Korea, it also served as a symbol of Korea's emerging self-confidence. Nevertheless, Korea's investment in infrastructure during the 1960s was never enough. By the 1970s, the country started experiencing major bottlenecks due to lack of infrastructures. As a result, the country embarked on comprehensive programs to develop the country's airports, seaports, highways, railways, and telecommunication to support the booming industries. Energy infrastructure wasn't overlooked as well. Securing adequate power was one of the government's most urgent tasks. By the 1960s, the Korean government had merged 3 existing electronic companies, Chosun, Kyungsung, and Namsung, to form the Korea Electric Company, thereby securing the country's electric power. National character also played a crucial role in South Korea's rise to economic power. South Koreans are known for their strong work ethic, one of the most distinctive and rigorous in the world. The cultural philosophy of work hard, play hard has been a fundamental part of South Korean life for generations, playing a significant role in the country's economic success. In the country, long work hours are the norm, with 10 to 12-hour workdays being common. This culture of hard work stems from a highly competitive job market, coupled with a shared belief that diligence is a key route to personal and professional achievement. Beyond just hard work, South Korean workers value loyalty, honesty, and dedication, creating a workforce that is not only driven, but also committed to their roles and to each other. This incredible transformation is famously called the Miracle on the Han River. The term captures South Korea's extraordinary rise from devastation to prosperity, much like the miracle on the Rhine. The name specifically highlights the Han River, a major river that flows through Seoul, South Korea's capital, which became a symbol of the country's modernization during the 1960s and 70s. During this time, the once silent riverbanks began to fill with factories, bridges, and newly constructed infrastructure. The Han River, which had once witnessed the hardships of the Korean War, was now an emblem of South Korea's determination to rebuild and grow. As factories lined its shores, the river quickly became a bustling center of economic activity. It represented the strength and ambition of the people, who were determined to overcome the scars of war and poverty. By the 1980s, the term Miracle on the Han River had become closely associated with South Korea's economic success. Today, it stands as a reminder of the nation's remarkable achievements and the determination that helped it rise from the ashes to become one of the world's most prosperous countries. This powerful blend of factors helped South Korea leap from poverty to prosperity in just a few decades. Its development from being an extremely poor country to Asia's 3rd most urbanized country, the world's 12th largest economy, and home to many world-class companies is very impressive. What other countries' transformations inspire you? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed our video. See you next time.